promise of animancy, internally the knights quietly began a more cautious exploration of the new science. Depleted in numbers but bolstered by their newly forged stock of soul-augmented weaponry and a small contingent of forged knights, the Knights of the Crucible would soon become an order few in Defiance Bay would dare to cross. But the opportunity to build upon their newfound power proved too great a temptation for the High Justice. What was at first a measured approach to animancy soon gave way to a rapid buildup of armaments. The High Justice would eventually seize control of the city for his order and place Defiance Bay under indefinite martial law. Though the machine atop Ter Noaneth had been disabled, it had not seen its last use. Heritage Hill was rebuilt, and no sooner had the first families moved in to resettle the district than members of the Leaden Key, acting under standing orders from their Grand Master, climbed the tower and reactivated the machine. The initiates slew a handful of the new settlers under cover of night and watched as history repeated itself, the victims reanimating and devouring the survivors. After this second incident, the district would remain abandoned.
¿Qué dices?
The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay, and few animancers survived the first day. Many Deerwoodans took the end of Widewind's legacy as a sign, both that the gods did not approve of animancy, and that the purging of animancers in Defiance Bay had been enough to satisfy them. In time, their rage would subside, and a number of surviving animancers remained in and around Defiance Bay, often taking to the wilds to practice their science without repercussions. The town of Deerford had seen the last of the cult of Scan. Dark rumors about the town's many curses quickly faded, and travelers soon returned. The fortress of Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every thane and earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodinians. Likewise, it also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. After the death of the Master below, a strange quiet fell over the endless paths of Odd-Nua. The attacks on the fortress above ceased, Odd-Nua's silent titan the closest remaining thing to a master in its musty, forgotten passages. Palagina had gone against the Duke's Bell's orders by inventing a new trade arrangement with the Anamenfoth to accommodate the recovering Deerwooden market. With the Deerwood's people strengthened by the Watcher's gift of souls, the Valian republics found themselves struggling to keep up with their new competitors. For her outrageous insubordination and audacity, Palagina was banished from the republics for several years. After the southern forest of Erglonfoth opened to both the republics and the Deerwood, the Valians found that the combined efforts of all three nations had created a robust trade network. The Duchessa of Biajepi granted Palagina a pardon for her foresight, though it took many years for her to regain the trust of her superiors and brothers in the Order. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Deerford, which, like many towns in the Deerwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Deerford soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Deerford would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Theos Ixarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Theos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Theos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the leaden key. With the Watcher's goals accomplished and his own vows fulfilled, Kanarua sailed back to Tekoa. His friends and family found him much changed, for a pall had fallen upon the man, smothering his former enthusiasm. Called before the Lore College, Kana told them of the pain the Engwithan legacy brought to the lands abroad. He insisted that a search for answers abroad could only fragment the Rawatai people, as it had done to the Deerwood. His findings were met with much respect, and Kanarua's voice came to be considered an influential one in the growing move towards Rawatai's isolation. With Theos defeated and the souls released from Sun and Shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered the first healthy child in over a decade. She remained there, and with each new birth, she saw a measure of hope restored to the Deerwood and a measure of grace for her own troubled past. You and Sagani never found Persoc together. The Adra figurine had gone dark by the time they emerged from Sun and Shadow, and it was another month before Sagani finally accepted that Persoc's trail had gone cold again. Her search took her beyond the Deerwood and as far as the Living Lands. She saw the great coastal cities of Rawatai and the ruins of Old Valia, absorbing the details of these strange and distant lands. 20 years passed before the Adra figurine finally glowed again. When it did, she followed its signal to a quiet hamlet on the outskirts of Adir. There, she met a young farmer and told her of her past as an elder of Masuk. Sagani returned to a village that had forgotten her face, but remembered her story. Masuk greeted her with cautious warmth, and Sagani found that their ways had become strange to her. She also learned that Kalu had perished of winter fever a few years before, and her middle child, Najuo, had died in a raid. But she found her daughter Yakona a hunter and mother of 3, and her son Malak a builder of mighty walls. In them, she came to find her place in the village, and the familiar contours of a world that had changed in her absence. For you, the death of Theos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.
¡Qué juegazo! Qué títulos, ¿no? Por 2, por 4, por 8, por 16, por 32. Mira qué de nombres. Mira qué rápido pasan. ¡Uy! ¡Uy! ¡Nombres! Hasta luego. Ahí salgo yo, seguro. Pero no me voy a buscar. ¡Uy! GG. ¿Qué os ha parecido? ¿Os ha gustado? Ha estado todo guapo, ¿no? Al final. Y ya. Pues nada, chicos. Eso fue todo. Eso fue Pillars of Eternity. Espero que os haya gustado. Y ya jugaremos más. Ya jugaremos más, la verdad. Yo creo que ahora el siguiente que voy a jugar va a ser mañana es Dota. Juegazo, juegazo. Mañana toca Dota. Y ya os digo, igual por la noche, mañana a partir de las 10. Si no os gusta Dota, a partir de las 10 vamos a jugar Banner Saga. Así que os espero por aquí. También... De nada, muchas veces, como decía mi abuela. Muchas veces. Lo dicho, va a haber más streams, o sea, esto aquí no acaba el stream, ni mucho menos. La intención es que el stream crezca y meter más juegos, meter variedad. ¿Cuántas horas? 77 horas. Pero eso sin contar... Aquí me dice Steam, me dice que 89. Porque claro, tener en cuenta que ahí no cuenta las veces que hemos cargado, las veces que hemos muerto, etcétera. O sea que yo diría que en total han sido como unas 85 horas. Porque alguna vez he dejado abierto el Pillar sin querer, que me olvidaba que lo tenía abierto. Así que 85 horas de Pillars. La verdad que está de puta madre, ¿sabes? Amortizado 100%. Y lo dicho, chicos, me voy a dormir, que son casi las 3 de la noche ya. Y mañana más juegos. También os digo, después de Banner Saga vamos a jugar Witcher, vamos a jugar Baldur's Gate, vamos a jugar mogollón de cosas, algún juego de terror, quiero meter algún día de juegos de terror, quiero meter algún día aventuras gráficas. Vamos a ir metiendo cosillas, así que nada, os espero por aquí mañana, chicos. Pasar buena noche y descansar. Nos vemos. Oh, mierdas. ¿Dónde estás? Aquí. Ahora sí. Hasta luego.